We've all been there. You go online, you want to learn something that's going to get you out of the scenario that you're in, going to better your life in some way, but you end up drowning in a sea of notifications, ads, and social media noise. It's hard to build a better version of yourself when you're constantly being distracted. That's why I have moved our entire community over to School. It's a space designed for deep learning and genuine connection without the scroll. I love it way more than social media. When you join us, you're stepping into a sanctuary. For all my clients, I provide free monthly workshops and a library of resources every single month. And now you can get those resources without actually being a client and only being a free member of the community. It's a place to grow alongside a tribe that actually wants to see you and your marriage win. If you're looking for a specific path, I have a couple of flagship courses available. Edifying Eden for women who are ready to cultivate peace and mindset and get rid of the resentment and the anger and the overwhelm and the yelling and all of that in order to be heard. And I also have Forging Fortitude for the men for building the resilience and the capacity to be able to handle your emotions, your wife's emotions, as well as your children, to build a legacy that people cannot stop respecting and to help you from A to B in getting there. I also offer one-on-one coaching for those who want a direct, personalized map of their goals. And for those of you that are ready to go all in right now, check out Connected and Committed. It's a 6-week self-study intensive that includes 3 video coaching sessions every single week, plus all the tools and resources that you need to make a permanent shift. Stop fighting the algorithms and start investing in yourself. Join our School community today and experience what it's like to learn in an environment built for your success. Click the link in the show notes to go directly to our community. I'll see you inside. Marriage isn't supposed to feel like roommates, but it doesn't have to feel like a war either. Hi, I'm Kameran certified marriage coach and a relationship expert. Every week on Married and Connected, I bring you real talk, hard truths, and practical tools you can start using right away. Whether you've been married 2 years or 42, this is where you'll find hope, encouragement, and steps that actually work. So let's make your marriage feel good again, starting right now. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Married and Connected podcast. Today's guest is an absolute treat. I'm so excited for this. While Thomas Blottenberger is a men's coach, he's going to speak to a lot of women as well and marriages. I loved this conversation so much and honestly could have talked to him for hours afterwards just because of the wealth of knowledge that he is, the resources that he provides, as well as the fact that he's just really easy to talk to, but also breaks things down in a way that are really easy to understand. He is the founder of the Risk Reward Agency and is a transformational coach for successful men who have built outward success, but inwardly feel stuck, hollow, and unfulfilled. And after talking to so many men and coaching so many men over the last 8 years, everybody needs this. After a 15-year career as a financial advisor, Thomas pivoted from thriving financial business to pursue a deeper mission that money can't solve. And that is helping men reignite connection, rebuild their trust, and lead themselves into their marriages with purpose and passion. Thomas discovered that behind most financial struggles was something a lot deeper. Fractured marriages, unprocessed trauma, numbed emotions, and a relentless drive for validation, which is something I'm seeing every day in coaching men as well. And these patterns couldn't be solved by more money, but by radical honesty, responsibility, and emotional mastery. So through his coaching, Thomas helps men confront those lies that keep them stuck and develop the courage to lead their homes, their businesses, and their lives. Using frameworks from the Warrior's Way, neuroscience, and his own story of spiritual and emotional rebirth, Thomas guides clients through a process of powerful daily action, authentic connection, and aligned creation. His mission is to empower men to rise, lead, and live the life that they were born for. On a personal note, Thomas is a devoted husband, father, and recovering finance nerd, Star Wars trading card collector, and a man who once used his best Gollum voice to teach a lesson on identity. I have absolutely no doubt that you are going to get so much from today's episode. And without further ado, welcome Thomas Blottenberger. Thomas, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see you today. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
before we even get started, tell listeners a little bit about who you are, like how you got started. Because before we started recording, you were telling me about your story and just basic synopsis. You were in finance for like 15 years and
Yeah.
then you became a coach. So
Yeah.
this spiritual download that you had, I want to hear all about that. So kind of talk about how you got into the transition from going from money to what you're doing now as a money masculinity coach.
Sure. Awesome. Well, one thing to be aware of is I'm still in the finance space. I have
Okay.
I have a money management company that teaches a scientific approach to money management, like actually using Nobel Prize winning research on how you design investment strategies. One of the things I thought was weird was that doesn't mean anything to men, particularly if they're in chaos around money or in chaos around their lives. That's not as sexy as the illusion of control with gambling and stock picking
Oh,
and
sure.
crypto trading and things of that nature. Works better generally for most people. So the journey is for 15 years I was in finance, and um, I started to realize very quickly that math is not money and money is not math. That you could showcase a mathematical equation on how money would work, and then people will mess it up generally. And you go, well, why is that? And it's because there's so much more behind the money than just the math. There's your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your instincts. There's the story that you learn when you're a kid about money.
Mhm.
And my daughter's 3.5, and she'll already tell me, Daddy, go in your office and close the door and make money so I can go to Disney. Right. So she's 3.5 and she's already understanding the role of money in the equation.
Yeah.
Um, and so all that plays in. So that was my journey, was to starting in the finance. And then about a year and a half ago, I was already starting to coach people. Like I had clients that I started to engage with about how they thought about money, what was going on with their relationship to money, their purpose around it. And people started going, well, man, you're like a coach around this. Wow, you're like a life coach. Wow, you're like a therapist. And I laughed it off like, oh, whatever.
As
And
one
then
does.
I had, right, as one does. And then I had last year, this just can't really describe it other than a calling put upon me
Mhm.
to take what I know in the money space and start coaching. And I couldn't figure out initially how to do it. I'm just like, okay, I'm called to coach. And I asked God, I'm like, what do I do? And the download I got was, the path will remain foggy until you walk it. And I go, that sucks. Okay, fine. So I start to walk it. I start to do some coaching and very quickly realize that men is the niche in which I can operate, because I actually understand all, like, what that is like, and how, the emotions, the feelings, how we're taught, the societal pressures and norms, right?
Yeah.
Then I felt called to coach on marriage, which felt really weird because my marriage was not very great at that particular time and I was blaming her. Like, okay, well, theoretically, I know how this works. So let me do what you're asking. And that's what the bio that you originally had was. And as I started to work through it and started to do that kind of coaching and messaging, I started to feel the disconnect between my messaging and my life. And the window that opened up was realizing I was the source of that.
Yep. Yep.
Both your partner and money are the best mirrors you'll have
Yep.
into what's actually going on inside you. But generally, we treat it like a window experience. It's like, oh, I'm looking through the window at that person and what money, is and what they're doing, not realizing it's actually the reflection.
Yeah.
Um, so that transition, I had this, again, being shown, money is actually, what is money? This is what I started to look at and started to talk to God about. What is money? What's the system by which we organize the success of our society? That's all it is at the end of the day. We used to have a barter system where I have 4 chickens, you have a cow, and we trade, and then I throw in some, goats to make it even. Now
Right.
there's a money exchange instead. So then what does money become? It becomes an energy multiplier, right? Whatever energy I ultimately bring to money, dictates what gets amplified. If I bring grounded spiritual connection, God into the mix, what amplifies is that grounded, powerful experience. If I bring chaos or internal strife and I get a lot of money, I'm going to amplify that energy. And this is why we see so often people hit the lottery, hit a jackpot at Vegas casino, whatever, and then a couple years later lose it all.
Yeah.
That's not coincidental. That is an energetic misalignment. The money doesn't match with the internal state, and therefore the money equalizes to the internal state.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, I can actually teach this. And a huge component, still in the marriage space, a huge component of relational drama and difficulty is money arguments, money fights, not knowing how to lead around money, not knowing how to set boundaries around money, bringing your childhood difficulties that usually one partner has a childhood difficulty that's the exact opposite of the others. And so they cause conflict and not ever realizing it's actually the energy that's at play and the internal game.
For sure. I want to go back to something that you said, not knowing how to lead around money. Now, as a man, as a men's coach, I really want to hone in on that because I think that is something that is definitely missing. And in the marriages that I'm coaching, I've coached hundreds of couples over the last 8 years. And one thing that I am seeing more and more of now that is opposed to, not really opposed to, but I didn't see it as blatantly obvious as 8 years ago as I do now, is that lack of leadership in the home from the man. And so for women, what ends up happening is it's like, well, it's not going to get done. So women start to take over that masculine energy, and then it puts men into that wounded feminine. So how do you help men, or what advice would you give men, or can you give in the insights into why this is happening?
Yeah. One of the biggest reasons is conflict avoidance, right? Like
Yeah.
men for most of society have been taught that our role is to provide, right? Our role is to create, or it even says in the Bible, right? Caretake and provide. And there's a distinction between caretaking and providing from a grounded place where I am, therefore I provide, versus I provide to be I am, right? Or to I provide, therefore I am. Most men have it backwards, and society is absolutely like taking the reins on that. So if I provide to validate myself, then I start looking at relationships and life transactionally. And when I start looking at life and relationships transactionally, I start keeping like a balance sheet internally. And a lot of times it just becomes easier to defer, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the point if I'm carrying this weight of making sure my family is safe, being ideally the emotional support system for my spouse, knowing I can't, like, subconsciously, that I can't really lay my burdens on or in that space, because that creates instability. And most men are isolated. I don't know if it's since COVID or maybe even earlier than that, but most men are isolated. They don't have the tribe that we used to have, right? Like the men's get together to be able to share these and unload these burdens. So they've got this burden that they're sitting with of who they're expected to be. They've transactionalized their lives. They can't share it with their partner for fear of destabilizing the relationship and removing the connection. So when you get to a point where if you've internalized that enough, it just becomes easier to go, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to chase things that are like provide the compensation of effort without the risk. And that's why you see so many men going into porn, going into alcohol, going into drugs, going into video games, because it provides the relief without the risk of identity difficulty or a risk of identity failure.
Yeah, I see a lot of men that are unfaithful to their wives for the same reason. They're chasing that external validation and not realizing they're going to blow up their entire family just for a moment, or even like a short-lived time period.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that makes so much sense when your identity is put into but I'm providing. And I hear this a lot in couples that come to me. The man will say, but I gave you everything. But I paid for everything. But I brought money home. And the wife is saying, yeah, and you're not present when you're home. You're not
Hmm.
on the floor playing with your kids. You're not emotionally attuned to me. And so provision, especially biblically speaking, I think from my perspective, and you can, tell me what you think about this, men have a definition of provision only being financial and not being emotional and spiritual and all of that. And so talk about how that then leads to a lack of leadership.
Yeah. Well, you see, it's societal shift is partially to blame for a lot of that. You know, money has become more prevalent as a societal, like a status thing. I mean, we could go into current like fiat currency in 1913, the Federal Reserve and the printing of money, but there's a lot of actual historical nuance and relevance to why men are the way that they are now, or why society the pressure that exists is different than it used to be. But there's so much more of a emphasis on the provision of resources for lifestyle than there's ever been, especially with the advent of being able to see what everybody's up to at any given time,
Hmm.
right? Social medias and things of that nature, right? You're constantly bombarded with ads about the things that you would want to buy or can't buy, or the vacations or whatever. And then they see other people doing all these things, right? So it becomes this provision, provision, provision. And what occurs, I think, for the man in a lot of these instances, and why it's not so much that it's a perversion, the best way to say it, of the role of the man. And society is doing a really great job of extrapolating that. Is, I provide the lifestyle, and there becomes an expectation almost to a certain degree of peace in the home. Right? It's in the transactional game. It's I'm buying peace because I have none internally. I'm
Right.
constantly comparing myself. I'm
Right.
constantly looking at life and what I'm actually doing. There's always the next tier. There's always the next thing to hit. There's always the next pressure. I'm expected to carry it all. A man's expected to carry it all and not complain. That's the society, the energy, right?
Right.
And so it's ultimately what the man wants in the household is peace and acceptance when he goes out to the day and fights the dragon out in the world. He wants to come home and have praise and validation and feel accepted. So when he
Right.
steps into his home and experiences beratement, or what a woman generally is trying to say is, I miss you, I want to connect with you. But
Right.
that's not usually the language of which
You're
is
giving you.
used.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's usually, hey, you're never around. Like, could you put your phone down for 5 minutes? And so a man in this provision mode where his identity is providing can't hear that as anything other than attack on his peace, and becomes defensive, which then
Right.
has her, because she's being misinterpreted, feel disconnected, right? And then she slowly
Brilliant.
shuts down. She learns
Yeah.
to adapt and survive. When she learns to adapt and survive, intimacy disappears. When intimacy disappears inside that transactional game, it goes, well, what the heck am I doing all this for? I'm providing for a roommate, basically.
Right.
And this is the source of so much strife, is that lack of internal, and this is a journey, not a destination, but this
Right.
lack of internal um, groundedness in who a man is and why he provides, not that the provision is supposed to create the man. So
Okay.
once a
So what
man
I'm
gets that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. So what I'm hearing here is that there's basically three different problems. So the first problem is a societal norm. The
Yeah,
second problem is the internal lack of peace that a man has. And then the third one is how his wife communicates.
yeah. Well,
So,
it's the most important one of that list is the internal piece, the internal space for the man. The other two are amplifiers.
right. Okay. So what do we do? I can handle the communication piece for men and women together. But in terms of fighting that societal norm and changing that, what do we do? Second thing, what does a man do to create the internal peace? And how does he know that because I think a lot of men, the ego gets in the way and it's like,
Mhm.
no, I have peace. It's your problem. Kind of like what you were talking about earlier of like your wife, your marriage wasn't great, but you were blaming your wife for that. So
Yes.
how does a man actually recognize, no, I'm the problem here, and then get rid of the amplifier of the societal norm?
Yeah. Well, the
Long
societal
question,
one,
but
it's a good question. If I knew the societal one, I think I'd want to be president, like
sure.
I think the societal one is a grassroots issue. Um, the only way I think, so there's this concept called critical mass. And critical mass is demonstrated in cultures and civilizations to only require 10% of the population to it's how it works is if we have 10% of the population that are like aggressively or very vocal about something, that it'll generally shift the remainder of society. And so I think it's a grassroots issue where we have to get back in the home to this concept of presence versus paycheck
Love
and
that.
the groundedness in myself aligned with God versus myself as the material things that are provided and the provision and my work ethic and all of those kind of things. Um, so societally, I think that's the main piece of the equation. For men, it's every man's a little different, but generally what I've discovered is it originates with some form of masculine wound from
Okay.
childhood. Like
Everything goes
for
back to your childhood.
well, always, yeah. Well, because it makes sense if you think about it. Is a child doesn't know how to make sense of the world,
Sure.
and so they rely on parents for support, and then they rely, at some point when they're a child, something happens they don't know how to interpret. Their nervous system kicks in to protect them from it, and becomes an operating system that now just runs, forever, unless it's
On autopilot.
challenged.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Unless it's
and then
challenged.
it's
That's the key right there, I think.
yeah. Well, and that's the game is challenging it in a way that's, you can just tell someone, hey, you're running stories and stop doing that, but that doesn't really work very well.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so like for me, one of the things I realized is I don't know if it was the previous generation or if it's been a generational, I think it's been a generational thing, like my dad and my dad's dad. There's the dad tends to replace money with presence. And so the child like learns that early on, that while my parents not involved because of money. So I both love and hate money. I love it because it's going to provide the stability that my parents didn't, the presence that my parents didn't. Money in that way, money is rational for a man. Okay, I make money, it means I have higher status. So I earn money, I'm validated. I did a good job, then I'm rewarded. My accounts go up in value, then I'm accepted. Right? There's this reward feedback system with money that's very reminiscent of how parents reward kids.
Mm,
And then in addition to that, it's almost the loathing aspect of it is the realization that money took, love and intimacy and presence away.
mhm.
So that's where this internal chaos comes, is because there's this entire unconscious battlefield happening for most men where it's, all right, I make more money. And initially I feel really good about that because I have a metric by which I can prove I'm a good boy.
Yeah.
I have a
Success.
metric by which I can validate my existence.
Mhm.
But then when my wife starts to talk about how I'm not participatory or I'm not present or my kids are, like I'm not involved with my kids, now I get evidence of the repeat of history. And that's a hard thing to look at.
Yeah.
And it's a hard fulfillment of a prophecy, if you will.
Yeah.
Money, another way to say this is for most men, money becomes dad.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So when you finally realize as a man, when you finally realize that this is the case, like you've put your identity basically in your job and it's become what you do, not who you are, I can see the shift there where like integrity doesn't mean as much, loyalty doesn't mean as much, respect for your wife and your marriage and your children don't mean as much because you're not getting anything in return. Like when you give those things or giving what you expect to get in return rather.
Right. That's why
Okay.
most men will default into money, because money is predictable. If I do XYZ, I get a
I
bonus
get
or overtime.
XYZ.
If
Yeah,
I
yeah,
do
yeah.
XYZ in my relationship, maybe I didn't do it right. Okay, like just a simple example that my wife, so I grew up in Hawaii. We didn't
Okay.
have a dishwasher, like as far as like
Okay.
the machine,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
This was the
Yep.
dishwasher. so, so,
Your hands.
so,
Yes.
right. So we buy a house and it's got a dishwasher, and, I'm loading it for the first time, and she comes over and she's like, "That's not how you load it." And I'm like,
Yeah.
um, it's going to all go in and get washed, and then it's going to come out. So does it really matter how it's loaded? Right. And so then it became this like dialogue where it became I'm being penalized. And this is a small example, but if you can
Yeah.
extrapolate it, right? I'm being penalized for attempting to do something that I thought would provide value, that I
Yeah.
thought would make, like in a transactional sense, would be a deposit, a brownie point, right? And so when it becomes like, I can't figure this out, I do nice things and I get berated. This is one of my coaching clients. I make my wife a stay-at-home mom, and she's got more things to be mad at me about while I'm working harder and have tons of stress. It
Mhm.
becomes I can't figure this out. And it's so reminiscent of being a kid trying to figure out how to win my parents' love and affection. I'm just going to tune out. I'm just going to go to the thing that works.
Yeah.
Money works. I
Yeah.
do XYZ. I get it. I work
Mhm.
hard. More comes. It's
Yeah.
predictable. It's understandable. It makes sense of the game of life that most men are so confused about.
Yeah. No, I totally see that. I absolutely see that in the dynamics of the couples that I'm coaching. And like I tell them, it all comes back to you. You like no relationship is ever going to stay the same if one person radically changes. So for men who are listening, or even wives who are listening and sharing this with their husbands, then what's the secret to calming the chaos within the man and creating that true internal peace?
I'll answer that the best I can, because there's key components of it, but each person's different because their experience is different. But the underlying nature of it is we all want to be accepted and seen,
Right.
right? I would even make the case that joy, the experience of joy, is actually synonymous with exception or acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Like people generally feel the most amount of joy when they feel like they can just be themselves,
Be themselves.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what tends to happen, it's a really counterintuitive game that we've been sold both internally from our own subconscious, but also externally from society, that to get joy, you must add into the equation. I need to add more things. I need to have more things. I need to be more things. Right. And so in a society like now, where you can literally, Amazon something to your house, or, work harder, get a bunch of money, buy a house with a 3% down, or even 0% down mortgage, right?
Right.
We live in a society that's telling us add, 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 add. There's nothing wrong with adding, but if you're adding in the pursuit of joy, you're actually muddying the equation. In
Mm,
my belief system, and what I think is biblically proven, and just like the factual as a universal truth, is you do not you don't get to a place of joy and self-acceptance by adding. You get to it by subtracting. You
yeah.
subtract the false narratives. You subtract the the emotional equation, right? You subtract this identity mixed in with the provision, right? It's and the game of that, one of the most impactful ways for men to get there is to deal in a powerful, effective way with the emotional experience of being a man. Most men feel rage. Most men feel
Accepted.
anger, right?
Yeah.
Most men feel irritation, sadness, guilt, shame. And what we're told is, great, it's cool that you feel that. Do this with it.
Yep.
And just shove it
Shut it
down.
down. Yeah. Yeah.
And so when I do that, the brain is really awesome at survival, right? Your
Yeah.
conscious is kind of like the CEO. David Eagleman says this. Your conscious is kind of like the CEO, and the subconscious and the other parts of the brain hand up problems. And then if it's a big enough problem, the CEO is like, where did this come from? Right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so when I shove down these emotional experiences, I'm removing them from the conscious, but they
Mhm.
still operate and live within my subconscious.
Mm.
That's why something will happen and you'll feel yourself like, I'm sure this happens for women too, is you'll feel yourself bristle and there's like the tightness in your chest and there's the, like almost like the tension. And you're like, what's that? It's your subconscious experiencing something that you didn't allow yourself to process.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's the biggest game here, I think, for men is first start to notice language. And most of the language is going to be about the contractual or transactional aspects of relationships, as a function of you trying to buy your own self-acceptance. That's the first piece, is start noticing that. And then the second piece is starting to actually learn how to process these emotions in a powerful way. You don't blow them up on other people, but you also don't suppress them and sedate them. You
Right.
deal with them, ideally with a brotherhood or other men. That's probably the safest place to deal with that. And those two combinations together are a really powerful way to start to move into a more grounded, masculine acceptance of self place.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I call it building capacity. You build the capacity for those emotions so that when you can hold your own, you can also hold your wife's and your children. And, when your child throws a huge fit, your daughter's 3.5,
Mm-hmm.
when she throws a huge fit in the middle of Target because she can't have something, you don't lose your mind on her because you're able to stay grounded and then teach her how to be grounded and sit with her in that. And a lot of men can't do that because that embarrassment or the shame or the guilt or whatever is too big.
Children are really good. I learned this for myself, is that they're a very good trigger of our unprocessed emotional state.
100%. 100%. I am so much I have two boys, 16 and 5. And my 16-year-old, I look back and I'm like, "Man, I wish I could have a redo with so much of his childhood,"
Yeah.
because there was so many things. What they don't realize, and I'm the oldest too, so I totally um get this, but we grow up with our oldest children, and they are the ones that mirror so much back to us. And now with our 5-year-old, um, I have so much more patience, and Mason, God bless him, he's sitting back there going, "What the heck? Like, if I would have said that or if I would have done that when I was 5, I would have, had a completely different outcome here." And I'm like, "Yeah, and and there's a lot more apologies that I have to give to my 16-year-old than I do my 5-year-old." So, and that's one of the things is I'm saying like, "Yeah, because I realize I didn't do the right thing with you, and, now I know better." And that's I think the biggest thing. When we were talking before we hit record, we were talking about society, like societally men and the lack of leadership and all of that. And basically, the coined phrase now is one of the terms that I don't necessarily love because I don't like throwing men under the bus here, but that the bar is on the floor and they still keep tripping on it. And so, like,
Yeah.
but talk a little bit about that. Like, what,
That's
how do you,
that's such that's such I hate that. I hate
I do too. I do
that.
too, because I don't, here's the thing. It implies that men are like stupid or incapable or something like that. And I don't love that. And my second, like, this is going to be a 2-part question too, because, as you've already figured out, I'm the queen of that. But
I love it.
the first part of this is like kind of as we've talked about, what men can do, but talking into that point, because the thing that I've experienced as coaching men marriages is that men already have this imprinted belief system that they're stupid, or that they're a failure, or that they're not good enough, or that their effort is never going to be good enough. And so then we, as that norm, just like the other phrase that I hate is narcissist, because I really truly believe that only 1.3% of the world is an actual narcissist. Everybody else is just very low.
If we've learned anything about society today, we use words to describe what's not accurate to justify ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
So it becomes so much easier to go, oh, he was a narcissist or she was a narcissist then.
Yes.
Maybe there was
Instead of
something I
taking
could have done.
accountability. Yeah. Yeah. Instead of taking that accountability. Yeah, absolutely. So talk into that, and then talk into, as wives, what do you recommend that we do for us to be better wives, to help empower our husbands instead of making them feel less than by saying things like they're tripping up over the bar on the floor?
Yeah. Well, that's really good. So let's talk about the first one, the societal aspect.
Yes.
So what I think it all stems back to is, if we look to the origin story in the Bible, and there's so many different opinions. Is it literal? Is it is it alliteration, metaphor? I don't really. I think whatever is most useful for the conversation is what matters. And if we look at the origin story of humanity in the Bible, God creates Adam and he gives Adam dominion. Well, what does he give Adam dominion over? Himself, right? And the processes in the world at the time. Not the outcome, but the processes.
Right. Yes.
Right? And then Adam's lonely, so he gets Eve, right? And then I don't think, this is, perhaps heretical, I have no idea. I don't think the original sin was the actual eating of the apple. I think it's how it was handled. So Eve is deceived, eats the apple, gives it to Adam. Adam gives away his dominion. He knows what to do. He knows what he's responsible for. And instead, he acquiesces to keep peace, let's say, to follow suit. Eats the apple, realizes the mistake. Does he go to God and deal with it? Does he, quote unquote, man up? No. He enlists Eve to hide in the bushes, shame and guilt covering their bodies. And then when God finally finds them, he doesn't say, yeah, I messed up. He goes, the woman that you gave me, she made me eat the apple. And then the woman goes on the defensive and goes, well, like thrown under the bus basically, and goes, well, the serpent, right? Yeah. And so I think that whole play is what happens just in relationships and life in general is a man not standing in a place of power will acquiesce responsibility and power, will abdicate his natural authority for the purpose of making a woman, quote unquote, happy. And you see this in everything, right? Everything. Happy wife, happy life. That's a cliche statement. I hate that phrase. Right? Well, but it's the underlying thought process is happiness is the game. Happiness is not the game. Growth is the game. Connection is the game. Truth and difficulty, challenge, right? This is the game that we're playing ultimately. And so I think this is, while I hate the statement, I think that the bar is on the floor and men still trip over it is women's way of societally women's way of expressing their displeasure with men not leading.
Right. No, I would totally agree.
Yeah. And while a ineffective way to explain it for a man to go, oh yeah, you're right. Like, you're right. I'm not leading. That's what you're trying to communicate to me when you say, it triggers the I'm stupid, I can't do anything right.
Right.
But I think essentially, if you look at modern day feminism, it's a rise, or it's a risen out of women getting tired of men not stepping up and throwing them under the bus societally,
Yeah.
right? So that's also part of the game, is the more that there's grounded leadership in the home. And this is demonstrated scientifically. There's people that get mad at me about this, but this is demonstrated scientifically. A man standing in power, leading a household, it tends to be that women will follow and relax into his lead. It's a biological design that people don't, and spiritual design, people don't necessarily like, but it's the truth. And I've seen it time and time and time again. This is why when men come into my program, you can start the initial meeting. You can tell me anything you want about your wife, what's going on. Da, 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 da. From there on, we don't talk about her. Like,
Love
it's a
that.
you game, right? Like,
No, that's absolutely true.
yeah. So
But you'll get no
that's
disagreement from me. I think
yeah,
feminism, honestly, and I may lose some listeners here. I don't really care. I truly believe that feminism has killed the idea of what marriage should be and what God designed it to be.
yeah. Well, I
I
would
think
maybe say it a little differently, and
okay.
you might lose some men listeners, or I might lose. I think men, as a general rule, giving into money instead of presence were the initiators of the feminist movement.
Ooh, never thought about that.
Yeah, because feminine energy follows masculine. So if the masculine energy is not present, the woman assumes masculine energy, but
Yeah.
it doesn't feel right. It doesn't land
No,
properly,
it's
and
not natural at
it
all.
feminizes the man,
Mhm.
right? And so this is why I said this is a historic, like, we look at like the actual history of money and the creation of some of these different elements of the current economic system. I'm a huge
Yeah.
capitalist, but from a creation standpoint.
Mhm.
But at the same token, there's some negative elements of it, at least from the government perspective of it. And from that aspect is this drive to provide versus presence, right? You provide paycheck versus presence.
Right.
I believe the feminine movement is a rebuttal, a refusal of the paycheck over the presence. If you're not going to be present, I can make my own money. If you're not going to be present, I'll just handle my
Yeah.
own stuff. I'll adapt to survive because you're not leading.
Yeah. Okay. So second part of the question that I asked earlier is
Yeah, I forgot about
what
that.
what do women no, that's okay.
Yeah.
This was good. What do women need to do in order to empower that leadership and in order to call that man that they are married to step up and be the leader versus taking on that role herself?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is, it seems simple, but it's actually really difficult, is your man. Yeah, this is how I want to say it. Your man will adapt to the energy that you bring in the space. So if I bring a nagging, you're not good enough, and even if it's not my intention to have it be that way, but if it's like every single time you load the dishes, it's corrected. Every single time you take out the trash, you're told you didn't do it right. Every time you take care of the kid, there's Overwatch, right? Mama
Right.
copter.
Right. Love copter.
Right. While it's absolutely understandable and even biological, again, the amygdala, which controls that fight or flight response in the watching for threats, for women grows during pregnancy, right? And
Mhm.
so, which biologically makes sense.
Right.
And if I don't, same level of awareness a man needs for a woman, if she operates like that as a default, the man will escape into sedation or work, because there's no peace in the home. And if there's not going to be peace in the home, I might as well do something I know is going to work, which is working to make money.
Right.
That's number one. Number two is, I've seen this a lot. I've had this experience too, personally, and I've dealt with it, and we've been really good since. But there's a feedback loop that gets created. A man not in power, seeking external validation, hears his wife say something, gets defensive, attacks, or like justifies. So then the wife disconnects, right? And this feedback loop gets created. Then a man steps into a program like yours, program like mine, starts to elevate, starts to shift, starts to develop, and the default position for a woman generally is I don't trust it.
100%. I see that
And
all the
that
time.
lack of trust fractures a lot of the growth that occurs for men. Again, because the game of becoming self-determining, dominion of self, is a lifelong game. I mean, Adam, the original creation, screwed it up.
Yeah.
So, like, we got to have more grace on. I'm not immediately going to do some kind of work and go, oh, I'm the source of all my energy and all my emotion. I have, nothing you do phases me. I am like, I'm rubber, you're glue. What you say
Right.
bounces off of me. It doesn't immediately happen that way. And it tends to be that as pressure rises, we revert. Okay, I have a new level of complexity in my business. That pressure rises, I'll tend to revert temporarily while I'm dealing with that, right? I go back to old survival mechanisms. A big client gets let go of, or they fire me, and all of a sudden there's instability with cash flow. I go back to money is dad, and I go, oh, I'm not good enough because I'm not being rewarded anymore. I go back to those survival mechanisms I did to deal with that energy, right? And so sometimes when women see that, instead of recognizing it's just a regression temporarily while they're stressed, they go, see evidence that I couldn't be trusted,
It doesn't work.
and
Yeah.
and they attack, and now there's no safety, and a man will just go, again, what's the point?
Yeah. No, that totally makes
So
sense.
it's this double-edged sword of men are responsible for leading, and this is biblically based too, women are responsible for creating safety, and not safety, responsible for creating peace in the household. I forget what Bible verse it is, but it's the one, you're better off being in the corner of a roof than with a nagging woman at home or something like that, right? Like, yeah.
I don't know what verse it is either, but no, I totally know what you're talking about
Yeah.
for sure. For sure.
And then there's one additional point too, which is the men that have the most difficulty with this, I've found, are the men who are wildly successful because their identity strategy worked.
Yeah.
The money is validation worked.
Yes.
When Jesus, if we go back to the Bible where he says to the rich man comes to him and says, I follow all the laws, right? I'm doing all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus says, well, go and give all your possessions. What Jesus was not targeting was the fact that that man had money. What he was targeting was the identity that man built around his success, and why the man walked away in crestfallen, right, and dejected and sad, was not because Jesus was rebuking him or saying like, this is the case. It was because he realized the choice was between discovering his identity newly connected to the Savior,
Yep.
and losing the identity he had spent his entire life crafting into something that on this planet works.
Yes.
And he was sad because he just couldn't bring himself to release that identity. This is why you see men who are wildly successful in owning multiple businesses have 7 marriages and 7 divorces, and have mistresses and all these other difficulties, because the fundamental issue is I'm in chaos. The only thing that works is my ability to produce money. I put my entire identity into that, and everything else falls apart. Those are the people I tend to work the best with because I've seen it for 15 years in the financial world. I've had my own scenarios like that. I've made high 6 figures. I'm currently making between the 2 businesses 6 figures, and I still have had that like identity piece of the equation knock on the door and show up. And there's times it's won, and it's chaos when it does.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There was something that I want to kind of switch gears here a little bit right before we wrap up, but I want to talk about, you had mentioned before we started recording about how you help men understand the inability to receive money, or like the energies around that. So talking into the men who are most successful are the ones who, are the most unsuccessful in their relationships. How does all of that energy work? How do you how does all of that connect?
Yeah, well, so the boy learns to perform for approval, right? If I do XYZ, let's take parents, right? I follow the rules, I'm rewarded. I don't follow the rules, I'm disciplined. I get attention when I do certain things. I don't get attention when I do other things. There's certain emotions I'm allowed, there's certain emotions I'm not. So the child learns to perform for acceptance. And as a man, when I then bring that energy into working or life, that energy actually works pretty darn well with money, because it's a feedback system that's very similar, and it tends to work very routinely the same way. This is why money crises, like let's say a man starts to do day trading and loses a large chunk of what he made. It's not I lost money. It's an identity level disruption. It's an existential crisis to the experience of the parental relationship of money, because the thing that was supposed to work, I do this and it does this, stopped working. So again, it just goes back to follow the progression of a man. For most men, there are exceptions, but for most men, you learn this game of performance equals validation, performance equals love, performance equals acceptance. So you put on the mask and you perform and you start working, you start making money, you start doing really well, start a company, start a business, start to do really well. Then you meet a woman, you still got the mask on, the performance games occur, you're courting, you're showing off the resources you've got, you're demonstrating subconsciously, I can perform to validate and take care of you. Works in the dating space. You get married. Now all of a sudden the wife can see the distinction between who you are at work and who you are at home. The mask no longer fits because you can't wear it all the time.
Mhm.
And so when that occurs, now we've got an identity issue, right? And that's the energy at the play, right? When I say it's the masculine energy of money, it's the masculine energy of presence versus performance. I can be present and make money. If I'm performing, I will eventually check out of presence, because the conflict of seeing that identity with my spouse becomes too much to bear. And I'll externalize it as she's nagging, she's not happy, she's not enjoying what I'm providing, so why bother? I'm just going to focus, keep my head down and focus on this, when it's really the more effective way to choose to channel that would be she's helping me see where I'm performing for acceptance and love versus showing up deserving of it in my current self, my existing experience.
Do you
So
feel
that's
like do you feel like purpose, like if men truly know their purpose in life, that takes away all of these issues, or do you feel like that doesn't always work?
no, no. Again, like everything else, it's about where it comes from. So if purpose, like if I create, so one of the things I do in the money management realm is I have people attend a 2-day event that talks about the psychology and the mindset around money. And one of the things that they do in the event is deal with purpose around money. And
Okay.
I've been to that event 25 times in my life, and every single time I've created a purpose. But
So your purpose
the
is always changing.
yeah, I always kind of like reinvent it. But what I realized was, and this was not that long ago that I realized this, is there's two versions of purpose. There's a purpose that aligns with who you are and what you're up to. And then there's a purpose that is a performance-based purpose. Oh, it would really I feel good if I would do this. People would, when I read this to other people, they'll go, wow, you're up to some good things. Wow, what a good guy you are. That's so awesome. Right. And that kind of purpose that's fantasy, because it won't align with the underlying behavior mechanisms. And then it just becomes another thing to shame and guilt yourself about.
Makes
So
sense.
purpose I think true purpose can only be derived from getting clear on what it is you actually want, who you actually are. Most people create purpose out of a opposition to something. Like I feel dejected. I feel like nobody, like I don't matter. I feel like nothing, like nobody cares about me. Okay, well then my purpose is to make a difference in the world. Why?
Yeah.
So that I matter. That's what's underneath that purpose. It's just
Yeah.
not spoken.
There's not a clean motive there.
Yes.
That
And so
makes
the
sense.
waters get muddied, and you'll resist. Human nature is such, you'll resist anything that's not in alignment.
Yeah.
You need
I think
congruency.
that's why I ask, because I think for me, the definition of purpose is bringing the best of who you are to the world. So, like, having that character and that identity, like, if your purpose is inspiring, then every conversation you have will be inspirational to someone, whether you realize it or not. Not that you're manipulating it to be inspirational, but that's just who you are. That's just the energy that you bring. That's
It could
why
be.
I
It could
wonder if
also just be performance at play in a more
yeah,
refined way, right? There's chaotic
sure.
performance, which is screw you. If you don't give me what I want, I'm just going to burn this house down. And
Right.
then there's refined, which is, it's all about other people and it's legacy and it's this. But if the underlying energy is still performance, there'll still be a lack of fulfillment.
Makes
Jesus
sense.
said, when the Pharisees cornered Jesus, right, and asked him what the commandments were, he said, there's the two greatest commandments: love God with all, basically everything. And he said, then love your neighbor as yourself. And it's very specific in that languaging of as yourself, right? He doesn't say love your neighbor like they want to be loved or love them in spite of yourself. He says as yourself.
Yeah.
Well, then that becomes the game, I think, is how could I love anyone else truly or actually have a purpose that is truly inspiring if I don't actually love myself and I'm constantly seeking validation externally?
No, that
You
makes sense.
cannot pour from an empty cup.
Sure.
And if you do, it will not be effective. It will always have strings attached. It will always be transactional.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thomas, as
So
we
love
wrap
of
up,
self, I was going to say love of self, it's a hard game to play for, but love of self is ultimately what allows for unconditional love. Anything
yes,
else is going to be stipulations, contracts, transactional.
expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Okay. For the men listening, if they want coaching, where do they find you? How do women follow you? Uh, give me all your information here, and we'll
Cool.
put it in the
Yeah.
show notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Probably the best way right now is I'm building my Instagram,
Good
social
luck.
media
That's a
profile.
game. That is
Listen,
that is a
listen,
game in and of itself.
listen. Well, that's the kind of the idea there is there's so much junk that's on there, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm not trying to be, if I did become, well, that would bring a whole nother level of pressure. So I don't know, but I'm not trying to become an influencer, but I'm using it as a way to kind of cut through the noise.
Sure. Yeah. No, that absolutely makes
Yeah. And so that's probably the best place. And then email would also work, but let's be honest, right? Who isn't on their phone with
sense. Yeah.
Instagram?
Sure.
And let's say occasionally doom scrolling, you know,
Yes.
that happens. And there's no shame in that, but
I heard
we
the
see
other
you.
day that Instagram is the new phone number. That
Yes.
instead of giving out your phone number, you give your Instagram.
Yeah. So I'll give both. I'll give not my phone number, cause who knows?
Let's
I'll
not
give
do that.
I'll give my email and my Instagram. So my Instagram handle is at Mr. Blottenberger. And we're going to have my name in the show notes, right? So they'll be able to see that.
Yeah.
And then my email is Thomas at theriskrewardagency.com. And that name came about, the company name, the Risk Reward Agency. It came about after 15 years of being in the financial world, watching people play a small game for settling in life. And again, noticing that it's not just with money that they do that. We settle kind of across the board as life throws us curveballs and as things happen that diminish our experience of self. We, instead of playing for what we want, or playing to win, we play not to lose.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the Risk Reward Agency, the objective of it is to help people in this capacity and multiple capacities, but help them embrace the risk that is life so that they can experience the reward of themselves connected to God.
Yeah. I love that. Man, Thomas, I could talk to you for 2 more hours. People, go follow Thomas, and that way you can learn about money, you can learn about energy, you can learn about your marriage. Like, everything is intertwined. It's not separate like we compartmentalize and think that it is. So, do you have coaching programs? Like, is it a group coaching, a brotherhood? What do you have for men?
Yeah, it's good. Right now I'm doing one-on-one. I've been piling in a few group programs. They're working very well, so I'm probably going to release that to the public. But at the moment, we're doing the one-on-ones, and then my intention is to create that brotherhood from that group test basically, and incorporate that, because we need. I think the other aspect of it is men need brotherhood. We need
100%.
that place to be able to experience some level of acceptance just for existing.
Yeah.
And if a man doesn't have that and he doesn't experience that, it's going to be problematic for any kind of self-development.
It is. And as a caveat to all of this, for wives, I think it's really important that wives allow that to happen, because women can be the first to be like, well, you're not spending time with me. Well, you're not here. Well, I'm going to have to take responsibility while you go out and have fun with your boys, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of that, the underlying there is jealousy that they're not doing the same thing. But also, when the man goes out and has that brotherhood, goes to dinner, and of course, you can't be going to strip clubs and all that crap. But when you're doing it and it's a good, clean, like truly connecting with other men that are living the life that you want, that are pushing you higher, that are inspiring you to do more, you're going to come home a better husband, a better man, a better father, more present, more and it's only going to increase that success in all areas of your life. So
the way that I describe it, and I think women are intuitive about this, is there's a difference between brotherhood and bros. And
100%.
right.
Yes.
And there's a lot of men, and that's the distinction, is that there's a lot of men who use bro, connection as a different form of escape.
Yes.
Versus brotherhood as a elevation, grounding, return to self, return to community place, to come back more effective in relationship and more effective in life and more, sure of self.
Yes.
So that's ultimately, if I'm going to coach a woman there to look at, is your man in a brotherhood or in a bromance?
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. There's such a distinction there. Thank you for bringing that to light, because that is, you hit the nail on the head right there.
Yeah.
So, all right, Thomas. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Married and Connected podcast. And we will for sure have you back again, because this is
awesome.
This is information that needs to be out there. So, all right.
Yeah,
well,
who knows? I might have a ton of new stuff next time too.
Love it. Love it. I am here for it 100%. So, listeners, go follow Thomas, and until next week, stay married and connected. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional counseling or therapy. Every couple story is unique, so take what's helpful and leave the rest. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that neither I, Kameran Thompson-Alaricki, Married and Connected, or Recognizing Potential Coaching are responsible for any outcomes related to what you apply from this show, especially if you are not a client of mine.